Welcome to the Pupil Attitudes to Self and School Stage 2 training webinar. During this session, I will be providing you with greater insights into the past data and what to look for when analysing your own reports. So, who is this training webinar for? It is aimed at schools who have already administered the past survey to students. I would like to feel more confident in understanding and using the past data. You should have already watched the Stage 1 Getting Started video. Please have in front of you a past PDF report, as I will be suggesting some activities for you to carry out throughout the session. Let's begin with a quick recap of the Stage 1 training. What is Pupil Attitudes to Self and School? PASS is a well-being survey that provides a measure of students' attitudes towards their school context and towards themselves as learners. What do the numbers mean? There are two different scores that you will find in the PASS reports. The non-standardised percentage score for each PASS factor and the standardised percentile score for each PASS factor. Mean percentage scores show a percentage of maximum positivity within the school. That is to say, if students within a school were to respond to, on average, 5 questions positively out of a maximum of 10 questions in the factor, then their non-standardised mean percentage score would be 50%. In the example on the screen, we can see that students in this group, on average, responded positively to 60% of the questions in relation to PASS Factor 2, perceived learning capability. Mean percentage scores are the easiest piece of data to use for comparisons across groups and across time. Percentiles are standardised scores benchmarked against national norms. Where percentiles are shown for individuals, these scores represent a comparison to other individual students in the standardisation sample. Where percentiles are shown for cohorts, these scores represent a comparison to other cohorts in the standardisation sample. In the example on screen, whilst the mean percentage for perceived learning capability is 60%, this comes out at the 7.5th percentile when compared against the standardisation. This means that 92.5% of schools included in the standardisation scored higher than 60% in this factor. You'll find that percentiles are easily interpreted within the PASS reports due to their colour coding. The red shading represents students and cohorts in the lowest 5% of responses. These students and groups have a low satisfaction with their school experience. The orange shading is for students and cohorts in the 6th to 20th percentile. It represents students and groups with a low moderate satisfaction with their school experience. The yellow, showing moderate satisfaction with the school experience, represents students and cohorts in the 21st to the 30th percentile. And finally, the green shading represents those with a high satisfaction with their school experience. It shows students and cohorts in the 31st to the 100th percentile. The overarching objective of this training session is to gain a deeper understanding of the PASS reports and what the data can tell you about your students. We will be discussing the 9 PASS factors, going through analysis of the scores on both a group and an individual level, and providing you with where to go for next steps with PASS interventions. PASS is a 20-minute survey that was developed by 2 education psychologists, and it consists of questions which focus on attitudinal barriers to learning. It enables you to identify issues that could prevent a student from reaching their full potential. Guide pastoral support at whole school, cohort or individual level. Monitor the impact of wellbeing intervention programs. And to identify invisible groups such as fragile learners. There are translations of the questions available in several languages, so do get in touch with us if your students would benefit from accessing the survey in their own language. PASS is based upon 9 standardised measures or factors. Feelings about school, which explores whether a student feels secure, confident and included in their learning community. Perceived learning capability, which offers an insight into a student's level of self-respect, determination, and openness to learning. Learner self-regard, which is equivalent to self-worth. It's focused specifically on self-awareness as a learner, highlighting levels of motivation and determination. Preparedness for learning, which looks at areas such as study skills, attentiveness, and concentration. Attitudes to teachers. This measures a young person's perceptions of the relationships that they have with the adults in their school. General work ethic, which highlights the student's aspirations and motivation to succeed in life. Confidence in learning. This identifies a student's ability to think independently and to persevere when faced with a challenge. Attitudes to attendance. Whilst correlating with attendance, in international school settings, this allows teachers to see whether students feel that they want to be in the school. And finally, response to curriculum demands, which focus more narrowly on school-based motivation to undertake and complete curriculum-based tasks. You can analyse each of the 9 factors separately. However, an approach developed by Matthew Savage, former international school principal, may make this analysis much more manageable. He has split the factors across 3 different domains. Domain 1, the self, which measures how students feel about themselves as learners. Domain 3, externals, which measures how students perceive the school environment. And then Domain 2, the interface, which measures how a student engages with their school and learning experience. Should you want further information about this approach, you can watch a short video about this from Matthew on our website. The first level of analysis you will find in your PASS report is the analysis across the whole group. This is represented as a bar chart of the mean percentage scores, with the percentages detailed in the table below. The standardised percentile scores, all green in this example, can be found in the table below this one. This level of analysis will allow you to look at the scores factor by factor across a whole cohort. It can be particularly useful for comparing against previous year data to look for trends over time. Pause the video now and complete the following activity with your own PASS report data. You should turn to the page in your report that shows this bar chart. First, list 3 positives that you can see from the overall scores. Then decide which factors need most attention. Then consider the context. What may be the reason for these scores? So, for example, if there are some really positive scores seen, what is it that you do in your school that supports your students' attitudes in this way? The next question to ask is, what could you do to maintain or increase these attitudinal factor scores? The PASS interventions, which you have access to through your TestWise account, will be a really useful tool here. Pass Interventions goes through each factor and provides prompt questions for you to ask when interrogating your own data. On screen here now, you can see some questions for you to ask when looking at whole school level data. Pass Interventions also suggests a number of effective strategies that you can employ depending on the scores you're seeing in your own report. You can see here that for each factor, there is not just one strategy suggested, but a number of them, so you can determine what works best in your own school context. The next level of analysis we're going to explore is by year group or grade. On screen, you can see a comparative bar chart representing the pass percentage scores for each factor by year group. It is really important to note that you will only see this level of analysis where student information is entered correctly and in full when uploading their details to TestWise. It may be useful to turn to this page in your report now. This level of analysis will enable you to drill down into the scores even further and see if there are particular differences or similarities between year groups. So, for example, are scores impacted differently in grades where students have external exams, and this is due to the stress they are under, or perhaps because they are more motivated to succeed? When looking at your own report, you can consider the following questions. What trends can you see from the bar chart in your pass report? Are there any key differences or similarities between year groups? What could be influencing the scores? And then, what strategies could you use to maintain or increase the attitudinal scores? Remember, you can use the pass interventions for ideas for this last question. You may wish to pause the video again now to carry out this analysis with your own data. We are now going to look at the individual level of analysis. This is provided as percentile scores and is usefully colour-coded so that you can spot really high and really low scores. Let's look at the scores for Sarah Granger. It's often the first colour our eyes are drawn to. Sarah's scores are all in the red. She has very low percentile scores in all 9 of the factors. You may have students like Sarah in your own school and may have already identified them as someone of concern, and she may be receiving additional support already. If so, consider if this is effective. What additional support would she benefit from? For students with very low scores across all of the factors, PASS can not only help you to identify them, but also to monitor the success of the support strategies that you put in place. We recommend that there's at least 12 weeks between PASS sittings. PASS interventions will also help with further ideas of strategies to try with individuals. The next student to highlight is Amy Benson. Amy has scored highly in some of the factors, but very low in others. If we apply Matthew Savage's domains approach here, we can see that the externals are quite positive. Amy appears to feel happy in school and quite possibly presents herself as a confident learner who is content in the school environment. However, the low scores relate to how she feels about herself as a learner and how she engages with her work. It's really important to identify students like Amy, as they can be easily overlooked in school because on the surface they appear as if they do not have any attitudinal barriers. Charlotte O'Hara is another student who may be overlooked without pass. She has high scores across all of the factors except for general work ethic. Whilst other profiles may appear more alarming at first glance, students like Charlotte can be easily missed. Consider the reasons behind this particular score and the impact if this is not addressed. If these students are not quickly identified and appropriately supported, it could have further implications later on. Pass interventions will help you to consider what support strategies will be beneficial to support students on an individual level. As you can see here, there are questions you can ask when interrogating your own data on an individual level, and then you can find appropriate follow-up support strategies to try. Remember, you can access Pass interventions through your TestWise account. Pause the video now to complete the following activity. Using the individual analysis in your own Pass report, identify which students are confident in their own learning and the school environment. Which students are in need of immediate attention. You can also use Matthew Savage's domains approach to consider if there are any students who present themselves as happy in the school environment but are not confident in their own ability. You may also want to have a look at the Pass interventions if you haven't already, and see what support strategies would be beneficial for each of these students. Let's take a moment to reflect on the well-being and pastoral support already offered in your school. What pastoral strategies are already in place in your school? What has been their impact so far? Hopefully the past data can help you to evaluate this. And for those strategies that have been successful, can you use them to support others now identified in the past reports? Consider how you will use the data to monitor the impact of your strategies and interventions over time, and how you can utilise the past interventions for ideas. If you use CAT 4, our abilities test, in your school, the next step is to begin triangulating the CAT 4 data with the past data. By plotting each of your students' CAT 4 mean scores against the student's percentile score for perceived learning capability, you can gain even greater insights. For example, as you can see on screen now, those with high CAT 4 scores and high perceived learning capability scores are much more likely to achieve their potential as they have a very positive view of their abilities. Those with low scores across both CAT 4 and perceived learning capability can benefit from identification and support in the form of mentoring. These students can be found in the bottom left quadrant, which is coloured in red here. Learners that perceive themselves as less capable than they are considered fragile learners. These are the students in the bottom right quadrant. They have high CAT 4 mean scores, but very low percentile scores for perceived learning capability. Using PASS and CAT 4 and triangulating this data can help you to spot these students and support them appropriately. Before we end this session, a quick checklist to run through what we have covered and a suggested structure for approaching your own analysis. First, use the whole cohort analysis to identify trends across the past data for the group and compare this year on year. Next, use the year group analysis to monitor differences and similarities across year groups. Use the individual analysis to spot students in need of immediate attention, as well as those who may go unnoticed because they present themselves as happy in school. Utilise past interventions to find questions with which to interrogate the data and to determine the necessary follow-up needed on both an individual and a group level. And finally, if using Cat4, triangulate the past data with Cat4 data to identify fragile learners. Thank you for completing your PASS Stage 2 training. There are additional training options available for you which you can find on our website training page. For further information about our assessments, including webinars and case studies from other international schools, please visit our website. And should you have any questions, do get in touch at international@gl-education.com. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.